Welcome to heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. Once again, I am your excited host, Mike Chisholm. I'm always happy to be here. I'm always happy to talk about where He Changed It is going. Come and join me within the He Changed It heCast community. You can come and hang out with me there. He Changed It is moving leaps and bounds. We're growing like crazy. All sorts of amazing things as this company is growing and doing its thing to create awareness and give that place for men to go digitally. Now, I am always excited to be doing one of these, always. We've done a couple dozen of them already, and I've been excited during every single one of them. Today, I will admit I'm a little bit more excited, or maybe I'm excited in a different way. That might be a better way of putting it, because the person on the other end of this broadcast, unfortunately, we're not in studio because of COVID stuff, which is too bad. But the other person on the end of this podcast is one of the people that I enjoy spending time with more than anybody. If I'm going to take a night, a pleasure night, just a night where I'm just going to be carefree and have some fun, I am honored to have this man as a friend of mine who I have in my Rolodex of people that I can call, who is always up for an amazing time. And he happens to be not just into a lot of the same things that I'm into, but he is actually in the industry of one of the things that I have loved more than anything in my whole life, and that's comic books. The gentleman we're about to talk to today has an illustrious career, a long career in comic books, in the world of entertainment, everything from motion pictures to animation. He's worked for DC Comics for a long time as a writer illustrator. He's a freelance guy. He's worked for The Simpsons and Matt Groening's imprints. He's worked for all sorts of different projects. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the cartoon, the original one. I mean, my goodness, the ability that I have to talk to this person as a resource is phenomenal. But even more so, he's a friend of mine. He is one of the coolest people I've ever met. A singer, amazing artist, John Delaney. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be here on heCast today.
My absolute pleasure, Mike. And I couldn't have said my introduction better than you said, with emphasis on the friendship thing. You're the man.
Okay. And we're off to the races. Here we go. I first met you. You moved. I wish that I could go to my office. I've got an office downtown where I have a couple of pieces of things that you have given to me over the years. The first one, though, I first became aware of you living in my city when we had sort of a fan expo here, and you go to a lot of these Comic Cons and fan expos, the big ones and the small ones and the local ones. But you've been to some of the biggest ones around: San Diego, Emerald Con, all of Wizard World, all of them, right?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate, Mike. This year alone, I did New York, I did Chicago, I did Miami, I did Florida, I did, Atlanta, which was amazing, Dragon Con, that was incredible,
Dragon
Seattle,
Con, yes.
Portland. We really were inundating the Comic Con schedule this year, and it's been wonderful. It's one of my favorite things. DC and Bongo, it's Matt Groening's imprint, Futurama and The Simpsons, they're very well loved, those properties in those Comic Cons, so it's wonderful. The fans are nothing but generous, and they come up and they line up, and it's really lovely, and you get to meet them and do sketches and stuff. And so this year I spent a lot of time doing Comic Cons, and it was wonderful. But I'm a big advocate for doing the smaller cons too.
You are, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. One day I have a financial business, and one day one of my agents got really excited. He goes, "Mike, I need to see you at the office today." And I said, "Okay." And he knew that I'm a big comic book fan, and he shows up with this sketch, and it's of Batman, and he's at a slot machine, and he's pulling the slot down. I should actually take it out of the frame and bring it home so I could, for context, so I could show it here in the studio here. But and Batman he actually had a little bit of a smirk on his face because he just hit 3 bat symbols on the slot machine he was playing, and the slot machine was paying out like crazy, and it was the coolest sketch in the world, and it was more than a sketch. And I'm looking at it going, holy cow, who did this? And he goes, I went to a fan expo, and it said, "To Mike, all the best." And no, it's something cooler than all the best. I forget what it is, but And
I can't remember, but
he
I'm
said,
sure
he
it was
said, this
something.
guy, John Delaney, a DC artist, did this for you. And I couldn't believe it. I was blown away. And I said, how long did it take him to do this? And he's like, oh, you know, about a minute.
Maybe not that fast, but yeah, I can move on pretty quickly. I've been very fortunate. My background in animation helped a lot with that. When you're working in animation, you're drawing 25 drawings to every second of animation. So you get really, really quick. You start to build up the speed and understand that the most important things are not the details, it's the forms, the shapes, figuring out the actual shots. And then once you've got all that down, then you just put in all the details. So at a Comic-Con, yeah, I'm quite adept at being very, very quick, which is why I get things like lineups and stuff, because a lot of the other artists, and this is certainly no detriment to them, they put in so much heart and work into the work they're doing. But I understand that one of the things about a Comic-Con is people are in a hurry. They want to meet everybody. They want to see a bunch of the different displays. So I try to keep it real fast and make it real fun. And so I don't charge a ton for them. I just do these really, really quick sketches, throw a little bit of color in them, and then give them to them. Then it's something they can take. It's not going to cost them a fortune when they go, God, I blew all my money on that one sketch and now I can't do these other things. My whole thing has always been about make it an experience. So like I said, I go to the smaller cons for that very reason, because a lot of times people just don't have the money for that. And even in a place like Atlanta, right, you've got such a disparity between wealth and people who don't have wealth, but they all want to go. So my whole thing was just make it so that they can, you know, throw 20 bucks at me and I can give them a single drawing of Batman and it's going to make their day or something. So.
Well, and yeah, and I've seen evidence of that many times over. So many times. One thing I love about you is when we go out to a restaurant or we go to different places, you almost always have your sketchbook with you. And it's funny how even in a small city like this, you get recognized, and people will ask for all sorts of different things. I'm a huge Shazam fan. It's funny. I'm a Marvel guy from a storyline standpoint. If I had to pick, I'm picking Marvel, except my favorite superheroes are both DC. I got two, Batman and the original Captain Marvel. Shazam are my two favorite heroes. But just some of the stories in Marvel have captivated me a little bit more. But it's so funny how people will gravitate to you and you'll just whip out a picture of Shazam just like that for me. And you know, Mike, you are the real captain. And I look at it, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm afraid to put it in my office. It's like crazy. Have you always been this, like, was it a skill that you had? Like, were you one of those kids before kindergarten where it's like, holy cow, look what John has made? Or has this been a skill that you have refined over the years and just put so much work into, and that's how you've gotten so good?
Well, I think it's both. I was born into an artistic family. My mother is an amazing artist. My brother and I actually owned an animation company in Vancouver called Delaney and Friends for years. He's very, very talented artist. My other brother, who's a lawyer, is an amazing painter. We were always very encouraged to be artistic. Okay. But I did realize very early on that I had a much more natural predilection towards it. And realizing that, I also realized how short my skill level was. My talent level was okay. You know, I had the imagination, but I had to work on the skills to make sure that, especially when you're working in animation, you know, like I say, you're doing so many drawings, you can't afford to waste time on noodling away on one drawing. It has to be very utilitarian in a certain way. And animation really helped me get faster, better, stronger. And one of the things that we do in animation so much is a focus on the anatomy and spending time with life drawing. And so when I started teaching animation, life drawing became one of my main sources because I wanted to show people how important it was to get all the structure right. Because, you know, you may be able to draw the coolest scowl on Batman's face, but if his body's like this, it's not all that freaking cool, right? So you want to make sure the body looks cool. You want to make sure that everything is built properly in the structure of the drawing. So yeah, I would say I spent a lot of time. I did 3 years of commercial art, and then I went to the School of Hard Knocks. My brother and his partners at Delaney and Friends all went to Sheridan College. So they had all graduated. So they taught me the Sheridan method the minute I was there. So I was just this kind of rookie, go run around, get coffees, go get this, and try drawing, you know, and I was already an artist. So I just started studying under them. And a year from then I was, you know, working on things like Teddy Ruxpin and the Raccoons. And about 2 years after that, I was directing. So, you know, it's just about putting in the time. Hold on.
And, this is a piece of Canadiana here.
Yeah,
you worked on the Raccoons for like the CBC?
Yeah, the Raccoons. I worked on Teddy Ruxpin. I worked on Tales of the Mouse Hockey League. Like all these different Canadian things to get started out in Ottawa and Vancouver. And then I was fortunate enough to start getting, you know, really cool directing gigs and storyboard gigs. And I storyboard supervisor on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the first one. Yeah. And then I worked on, just so many. I got a reputation for being an action adventure guy because I was such a superhero fan.
Yep.
Doing that, I was at the same time sending in submissions to DC and to Marvel. And then when I got the DC gig, suddenly the DC animated world opened up to me, and I started doing a lot of that sort of stuff and doing storyboards and that kind of thing. And so then that just kept opening the doors for more. And then so I ended up directing Voltron Force, which is the sequel to Voltron, as we all know that character.
Yep, absolutely.
And, Chaotic, based on the card game. So I've been very, very fortunate in my career that I've kind of gotten this pigeonhole that I actually wanted. I wanted to be much more the action adventure guy, the superhero guy. I wasn't super interested in doing a lot of the kid stuff. I did a lot of it because you got to make dough and you got to pay the bills. But I love doing the superhero stuff. So that's fortunately where my career went.
That is crazy. I'm going to go back for a second. Now, okay, so we've talked a little bit about speed, and I've asked you if today you wouldn't mind putting a piece of paper in front of you.
Sure.
And blue sky. So throughout this podcast, by the end of this podcast, there's going to be something on that piece of paper.
Okay.
And so I'm just going to give you a blue sky, whatever you want, whatever you are inspired to draw, throw it down there. And by the end, we'll show the viewers as to what we've got here. And it's funny, I can't even see you, so I won't even see it till the end. But
no, that's true.
True or false? This is a real, talk about nerding out. Cyril Sneer, the Canadian villain that nobody ever knew that I mean, my goodness, the raccoons.
I will tell you this, I got to be completely candid about the raccoons experience. I left them like within a hot minute as soon as Teddy Ruxpin came on board. I'm basically what you call an animation whore. Yeah, I was working on the raccoons for maybe a month, and it was a funner cartoon. It had a way bigger budget. It was an American company that was using the Canadian company to do it. So they were paying super high. I knew all the animators that were over there. So yeah, I jumped out of raccoons pretty quickly.
Well, I can't say that anybody would necessarily blame you for that, but the fact of the matter is you can say you worked on the raccoons, and to a good 2-3 dozen of us, we will all go, yeah, when we hear that. And that's pretty exciting to me.
That was my big audience. Probably the biggest one.
Oh man. Canada Broadcasting Corporation funded cartoons.
Absolutely.
And the Teddy Ruxpin, I mean, you talk about, I remember that toy. And I mean, at that time, there were a lot of business models where they would throw a toy out on the market and then throw out an accompanying cartoon to, at the end of the day, just drive the sales of the toy. The Teddy
100%.
Ruxpin cartoon, I remember watching that. My brother used to watch it after school. And I mean, you had this talking bear that you could get, and that was cool. But you guys really added a whole mythos to Teddy Ruxpin.
Yeah, the script writers were phenomenal. I didn't have anything to do with the writing at the time. I was pretty new, so I was I started off as a intermediate animator. So I was just doing the backgrounds and doing all the posing. Yeah, I went up to seeing her very, very quickly, just because again it had so much action adventure, and that's really what my wheelhouse was. I really know how to push the characters and make the poses a little more dynamic. A lot of people, when they're working on younger kid stuff, they tend to be kind of soft in the approach. But the client actually wanted it to be a little more ramped up. They wanted young boys and young girls to both be excited. So they wanted poses like that with Teddy, not, this kind of thing. So it felt a lot better for me. So I was very, very fortunate to get that gig. And, we did 2 seasons of it. I have to tell you, man, there are so many hidden Easter eggs in that series. There's one episode where the elf village goes on fire, and every single elf is an animator in that building. Everybody I posed out, I put their faces on everyone. They're all screaming and yelling, and I've seen it about 1 million times, and I just kill myself. There's Bob Jakes, and there's James Hopefeld, and all these guys I worked with. So it was very fun. They gave us a lot of free reign, and we definitely ran with it, man.
Well, that's one of the things I love about you is that you are so fun when it comes to things like this. You are really, really Easter eggs and things like that. Right up your alley. You're so creative. And one of the many things I love about you. Also, you could be the new lead singer of Steel Panther if given the opportunity, which I love the idea of that. Have you always been in bands?
I have. That was kind of my dream come true. I think it's funny. I'm so blessed, Mike, to be able to draw for a living and have the opportunities that I've had. So believe me, I never looked that gift horse in the mouth. But like most young men, I wanted to be a rock star. And so I worked really hard on that, and I cut a couple of CDs, and look at this! There's one. Right now, I'm holding up a DMV Paper Dragon CD, which is one of the ones I did with this band. And then there's another band called Medicated Kelly holding up that. But anyway,
Medicated Kelly.
Medicated Kelly, this girl that we knew.
I want to meet her.
I'll tell you, this is so funny. She would get so stoned instantly on one puff of a doobie. Now, for you kids at home, a doobie is marijuana. And so Kelly was the sweetest girl in the world. She's going like, why don't you guys go out, take my car? And we go, you want to get a little higher? She, we medicate Kelly off, we went home off. It's a terrible, I feel awful about it, but you know, whatever.
Oh, do you still know Kelly to this day?
Oh yeah, I still talk to her all the time. Kelly's an absolute doll and has been a dear friend of mine, and we laugh about it all the time. She loved the fact I named a band called Medicated Kelly. She thought that was the funniest thing ever. So.
One of my favorite bands of all time is a band called Faith No More, and Faith No More did a song called "Anne's Song," and it was based on this gal. And to this day, they shot the video in her apartment, and her friends were in the video. And to this day, she just sings the praises of that experience. It's not often that you get a song or never mind a song, a full band named after you. Look at Kelly.
I mean, she probably wanted it all, but she couldn't have it.
There you go, man. My boys, I love those guys so much.
Yeah, they're awesome.
So, okay, you always liked the superheroes. You were always a DC guy?
Yeah, I mean, to me, DC was the thing. I mean, everybody is entitled to their own opinion. I've never been the Marvel or DC guy. I love the Marvel characters. I love the Fantastic Four. I've always been a big Captain America fan, even before Chris Evans freaking nailed that character.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of Marvel Comics, and I never felt that there was, I don't really understand the whole, you're a DC or Marvel fan. That's like saying I like football, but I don't like hockey. It never really rang with me.
Yeah.
So I've never felt that. But DC is the start. We don't have any other superhero without Superman. We don't have any other detective comics without Batman. We don't have any other magical characters without Captain Marvel or Wonder Woman. Intergalactic peacekeeping, Star Wars comes from Green Lantern. You know,
absolutely.
All these characters started these things. Julie Schwartz, when he took over the sort of rebirth of these things in the 1950s, going into the 60s, which then spawned the Marvel Age, was creating all those ideas that then Marvel took great advantage of and tweaked them and made the characters much more human. It's really hard to relate to a guy like Superman who nothing could go wrong with him. I mean, how bad is his life other than he can't get Lois, you know?
Right.
It's a multi-millionaire. How do you relate to that? Well, then Stan Lee comes up with this multi-millionaire who's an alcoholic, who has all these problems, right? And Tony Stark. So he gave all these different nuances that made those characters so much better. And that's why people gravitated towards Marvel so dramatically in the 60s and 70s. But then DC caught up, and suddenly you had guys like Frank Miller doing The Dark Knight Returns, or Batman Year One, and then you had John Byrne doing Man of Steel, and suddenly we had these deep dives into what it would mean to be those characters. And now the way that we understand Batman and the tortured psyche and that all came from Neil Adams and Danny O'Neill in the 1970s, more so than Bill Finger and Bob Kane. They explored that, but by the time that comic was doing so well in the 1950s, they couldn't get back to that because it became much more campy, and the 1960s show didn't help. So suddenly Batman found himself sort of trapped in this thing where Stan Lee and Jack Kirby could create this myriad of characters that had all these sore spots and pain and anguish. The thing was a creature that, you know, was trapped inside this thing. Well, that's great storytelling. So I was really happy to see in the late 60s and 70s when DC kind of got on side. And then in the 80s when they really, really took off with it and hired guys like Frank Miller, Alan Moore, all these guys to really deep dive into those characters. And suddenly, you know, you realize that Superman's not just this godlike character. He's this science fiction story that is so much more complex. And then they can do a movie like Superman, the movie, and suddenly it starts off as a science fiction adventure and then becomes this homespun story of the thing and a superhero story at the end. That understanding of the genre allows us to actually appreciate those characters more. So for me, DC is that you don't have any other characters without DC first. So it's
and I like I say, I couldn't agree more. I love the idea of Superman and some of these other early comic book heroes being so mythological. You know, it's almost a modern mythos, a North American cultural mythology. And like you say, as that has evolved, then it's gone down to the place of the idea of, you know, the everyman or bringing it into the real world and how it has evolved. And this is the thing I love about you too, is that, you're knee deep in the industry. You're so far in this industry you are where so many comic collectors, like some of the experiences that you've had, like you told me the first time you went to the DC studios in New York, and
Oh yeah.
and just some of these experiences that you've had. Um, you're still as big of a fan as we are, as you were before you got into it, and that's the one thing that I love so much. Are all artists who write for these or who draw for these monthly publications, are most of them fans the way that you are in your experience?
I think so. Yeah, I really do. We all have different degrees of it. Some of them are more purist. You know, they'll say, the company's keeping me down because I want to explore these characters and I want to introduce an idea of something that might be something controversial. The most important thing that you always have to remember as an artist or a writer is that this is their sandbox. These are their characters and you play within that sandbox. So they'll send you notes about what you can and can't do, and it becomes very, very rare. I think some of the writers specifically get very frustrated by being limited as to say, well, how about if Superman loses his temper one day and destroys half of Metropolis? You know, maybe
Right.
that's a good story. Well, sure, but we don't do that with Superman. You know, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So it can be a little bit difficult. So I think as I've gotten certainly further and further in my career, I've now become this kind of veteran of the industry where, you know, a lot of people sort of associate me with stuff from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And then I see a lot of the stuff, the 2000s to 2020s, where people are being much edgier and are trying to, you know, turn things on their heads. And I applaud that. I think it's awesome. But it also results in them being a little less satisfied with the fact that you're drawing Superman or you're writing Batman. You know, like those are those
Yes.
moments where I just catch myself and go, huh, what do I have to complain about? This is freaking epic, right? So I find that as was I when the very first Mike, when I first got signed to DC, I was doing Vengeance in the DC Universe. And that was based on Batman the Animated Series and Superman the Animated Series, but they hadn't done Justice League yet.
So
I
was
had
that Paul
hired-
Dini
Yeah,
style?
Sam and all that.
The
So they
big
wanted
chests
to
that
draw-
go into the smaller waists, the real.
Yeah.
Yep.
But in our particular case, we still had to work within the DC continuity, where they didn't. So Superman and Batman, those series, they could exist outside that. They didn't even have to have Superman and Batman or any of those things. Whereas with us, they wanted this to be an introduction to kids for all these heroes. So mine was Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern, or Wally West, Flash. You know, and so all those kind of things that were happening. Nightwing was, you know, estranged from Batman, so we couldn't have them working together like they did in the series. So there was a lot of things that we had as things, but we got to play in this amazing sandbox. For me at the time, as an artist, I was somewhat frustrated by the fact that I had to draw in this style that wasn't necessarily mine. So I had a long conversation with my editor and said, look, I'm seeing that Bruce Timm, and I ended up speaking with Bruce on a couple of occasions, and he loved Jack Kirby, and a lot of stuff reflects his Jack Kirby touch, and Alex Toth. And these are two guys who were big influences on me, and Wally Wood. So all I did was just focus on those influences on Bruce Timm rather than doing Bruce Timm. And so I could make my pages a little more Jack Kirby, or I could make them a little more Wally West, or Wally Wood rather. And that allowed me a certain leeway. But yeah, I definitely felt frustrated by that. So I relate to those artists and those writers who say, I feel confined by the fact I can't express myself. What I realized much later, after the book had been canceled and I moved on to Justice League Adventures and all that, was I was talking in my own language. I just wasn't necessarily using the line work I would have done, but I was picking the panels, I was picking the frames, I was picking the camera angles, all those things. So that was my language. And I always say the same thing to writers who get frustrated. I'm going, you do have a chance to speak in your language. Just there are limitations on that. Just as if you had to write a follow-up to Stephen King, The Stand, well, you can't just start writing in your own style. You still have to reflect what Stephen King intended. So it's the same thing there. And I think once people kind of get that in their mind, they're a lot less frustrated and a lot more excited to be doing it.
You know, and I think there's a bigger message in what you're talking about, John, too. I'm a huge David Letterman fan. I think about Letterman's original show that came on after Carson.
Right.
And one of the first things that he and his writers were given were a whole bunch of things they couldn't do that were similar to Carson and the Tonight Show back then. And they could have chosen that to look at as a sandbox, but they didn't. They chose to look at that as to say, okay, now how can we really flex our creativity? Because a series of obstacles have been given to us. How can we still express in our own voice with our own talents what we want to get across? And despite these obstacles, and the obstacles actually made for a sharper, more creative show. And it sounds like the same thing is happening with happened with you in one of those life lessons that you learned.
Well, I absolutely think so. And you know, the thing that Letterman thought at that time, and I like yourself, I'm a big fan. I've read a lot on him. was they were thinking, okay, well, these aren't the things that the obstacles. These are the roadways to take us to what we want to do. Somebody's wearing a Velcro suit, or somebody's in got an Alka-Seltzer suit and jumping into water, right?
Sure.
That was insane at that time. But I remember watching it, him jump on a trampoline and slap himself against the wall. I'm going, that's freaking genius, right?
Yeah.
Because the limitations allowed him to think beyond those limitations.
100%.
I think that's the nature of any successful artist, writer, comedian, anything is as soon as you go, okay, this is stopping me from doing those things, then you stopped yourself. Right. But if you think to yourself, hey, that's a limitation, but that means I can do this, man, the sky's the limit.
Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Talk a little bit about, again, I mean, I think everyone will understand now. This is turning into a geek out session, and that's fine. Tell me the story about the first time that you showed up at the DC studios in New York, and what was in there at the time. I don't know if it's changed since then, if they're on the Warner lot now.
Well, yeah, they're in LA now. So this is back in the day.
Yeah.
This is how old I am, but
Midtown Manhattan, right?
Yeah. So they're in Manhattan. They're literally across the street from the Ed Sullivan Theater at this point.
Man.
So two of my major things that I'm absolutely freaking in love with, DC Comics is across the street from David Letterman.
Yep.
I can't even believe that this is the case. I knew the address, but I didn't know it until I was there. It was my first time in New York. They'd flown me in for this meeting, and I'm giddy with excitement. And I'm standing, I followed the address, and across the street, there's this beautiful big black building with black windows and everything. And that's DC Comics and Time Warner. And I look across the street, and there's, the Late Show. And of course, later I find out that my editor at the time was good friends with Biff Henderson. And so getting tickets to the,
oh my God.
What? But you don't know that at the time.
No. So
I just stood there at I think it was about 2 a.m. in Times Square across from these two amazing things, just losing my mind. The next morning I go to DC Comics. I get to the elevator, got my portfolio. I had already gotten the job, but as is my way, I tend to oversell. So I already had 30 or 4 more drawings that I was doing in my portfolio to show. I get to the elevator, and the guy sees my portfolio. This is how cool this was. Very classic New York. It's got an elevator guy. He's wearing the hat and everything. He's taking you up. It's crazy. So he says to me, he goes, "You going up to DC Comics?" I said, "I sure am." And he goes, "Yeah, I could tell by that big suitcase." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm going to stop somewhere if you don't mind. I think you're going to like this." And I go, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, just going to stop somewhere. Just watch." So we get to the 7th floor. He opens the doors, and it's Mad Magazine.
Are you kidding me?
And there's this big bronze statue of Alfred E. Newman, and every issue of Mad Magazine's on the walls, all the way down up this wall, just filled. And I'm like, oh my God, and the door's shut.
That's that Simpsons episode. That's when Bart Simpson goes to New York. That's exactly what happened to him.
I'm telling you right now, it just was absolutely mind-blowing. So my heart's going, I'm going, this is it, I'm here. Doors to DC Comics open up. And here's what you see. DC Comics, back in those days in Manhattan, was built to look like you were on the top floor, or on the rooftop rather, of Gotham City. So the doors open and the carpet looks like stippled stone, and there's a night sky that's all Gotham City, and there's a bat signal projected into the sky. It's not painted, it's projected. You walk around the corner, and again, still the same rooftop thing. You know how on the top of roofs there's those 2 big fans that sit like this? That's
absolutely.
Desk. That's the front desk. 2 big fans. She's got a plate, a plywood plate over top it. That's the receptionist. In the corner is a full-size Michael Keaton bust or costume filled up with a mannequin that looks like Michael Keaton standing there like this, and Michelle Pfeiffer on the other side. I'm standing there just losing my mind that this is happening right now. That this is the lobby of DC Comics. She says to me, "Oh yeah, Casey will be right with you. Do you mind if I just take you to the meeting room?" I said, "No problem." So as I'm walking through, I'm going by every Aurora model that's ever been made of any DC character in this display case, fully painted, fully articulated, amazing. She sits me down. There's a guy sitting at the end of the table reading a newspaper, which I think is kind of weird and uncomfortable because I don't know who this guy is. So I look at it again, and it's a statue of Clark Kent sitting and it's fully, he's wearing cloth, and the paper's real, like he's
wow.
Just like so. And then Casey comes in, takes me in. We have this incredible meeting, tells me I got the gig. So I'm just up and down, super excited. He goes, as is our custom, walks me over to this wall, and they have every single one of their characters drawn by the original artist on the wall. So there's a Bob Kane Batman, there's a Joe Shuster Superman, there's all these, John Broome, Green Lantern, all these just incredible moments, Carmen Infantino, Flash, all their traditional guys, Plastic Man by Cole, like
absolutely.
CC Beck, Steppenwolf. And they said, first book you're going to be doing is Justice League. Which character do you want? I said, I'm a Superman guy. He goes, go sign Superman. So I said, Superman on the wall. That's what they would do for everybody who got signed. It was freaking remarkable.
That is fantastic. There are so many things that I could comment about this, but I just want you to keep talking about these things. This is just, it's amazing when you get to kind of, I believe that when you accomplish a dream, that's when you open up the opportunity to dream about other things.
Agreed.
And that seems to have been what's happened with you, because I mean, that was day one. Led to a whole bunch of other awesome days and awesome experiences since then. And I guess one of my questions, we talk about DC a little bit here. What's the thing that you either are most proud of or most excited about that you got to do, experience that you had, whatever that might be, top 1 or 2 moments of being at DC?
Okay, one of the great ones. Okay, I've had a couple that are just phenomenal, but I'm a big Superman guy.
He's had dozens, everybody. Okay, he hasn't had just a couple. I'm asking for the top 2. When we get together, he tells me story after story after story. He's had dozens of them, just letting you know. Okay.
I've been super lucky that way and super blessed, Mike. And so the first one was I loved the character Lobo, but Simon Beasley pretty much had the sort of the corner on Lobo. He was the guy they always went to whenever they wanted a Lobo comic. Well, then they introduced Superman and Lobo into Superman. And they wanted somebody to do Superman versus Lobo in the animated style, and they went to me. I had told my editor several times, God, if I ever get a chance to do a solo Superman story, that's me, man. Because I've done them in the Adventures of DC universe quite a bit in Justice League, but I really love Superman. So I got that one. David Michelini, phenomenal Superman writer, phenomenal Wolverine writer, phenomenal Marvel and DC guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Incredible script. And I just took off with it, and we got nominated for an Eisner, and I was just, this is one of those things where you just go, oh my God, this is so cool.
Yeah.
That one was great. The second one was, I'm a giant Scott McCloud fan. I don't know if you're familiar with the stuff, but he wrote Understanding Comics and Reinventing Comics. He is sort of the guy that a lot of our writers and artists really look to for a guy who sort of helped set the course for how comics can move into the 20th century.
Right.
He asked me specifically to draw a Justice League comic with him. And the script was amazing. And, when those kind of moments happen where you go, this person is, who I hold in such high regard is asking for me to draw for him, that was kind of mind blowing. And I guess the third one would be I did Death of Comic Book Guy for The Simpsons. We did a 6-issue miniseries with Ian.
Yeah.
And we got nominated for an Eisner on that one. And I was absolutely sure we were going to win the Eisner, and we didn't.
Do you remember who won?
I was like, I can't remember at the time. It was actually an independent. It was really great. It was a great book. Certainly deserved it.
Yeah.
But we were in a kind of an unusual category because we were in Best Children's Book at the time, which I really didn't think The Simpsons were children's books.
Yeah, that is a weird. The Simpsons is always falls through the cracks when it comes to that.
Yeah, yeah. So it was fine. So I think the ones that won, I might even have been Leave It to Chance, which is a phenomenal book from Grant Morrison and that. But I can't remember who won it at the time. But Scott McCloud and I. We were talking, and we were talking about you having done that one thing, and I'm going like, I'm nominated for this Eisner right now. He's going, oh, good man, I saw that. You're gonna win it. I'm like, I think so too, and nothing.
But to be nominated at the top of the craft, I mean that's just what an honor that is, and the adventures and things that you have done since then. So let's move out of DC a little bit. And you've done some work in the movie industry too. I mean, I know you haven't been a Marvel artist, but you've worked on some Marvel properties in the film world, hey?
Yeah, I had a great story. I've told Mike this story before, and those of you following at home, indulge me on this one because it's a pretty funny story. And if you're a Patrick Stewart fan like I am, I'd love to tell you the story. So I was at the time working for a company called Second Son, which was doing video games, and I had a reputation in Vancouver as being a kind of go-to superhero storyboard guy. So if they had a superhero property, we were just getting started at doing that. So one of the first ones that they'd done, Bryan Singer had done X-Men. So they did X-Men 2. And I'd gotten to know Guy Diaz, who was the art director, quite well. And so I was going to do storyboards on that. Unfortunately, I ended up having to wave off because I got to direct a show called Chaotic, which was great. But at the time, I was super excited to be working on X-Men, and especially excited to meet Patrick Stewart because I'm a big Star Trek fan.
Yep. And
so I met Hugh Jackman, and I met Anna Paquin, and I met Famke Janssen, and it was all very lovely. And I don't get too flustered by those moments. We're all just people, but I still, Patrick Stewart, that was the guy, right?
Yep.
I had it in my mind. I thought, the episode The Inner Light, remember that one on Star Trek?
Is that the one where he goes and lives an entire life?
It's a probe gets attached to Picard's head, and he lives that entire life on another planet that's doomed to pass away.
So, and he gets the flute. That's where he gets his flute.
He gets the flute, and he learns all that. So it informs so many other episodes there. But it's an acting class. If you're an actor at all, you just watch Patrick Stewart play young to old man, and it's just phenomenal. They don't do a lot with makeup. It's all him, and it's just an incredible acting class. So all I'm thinking is, when I meet Patrick Stewart, instead of going, I love this, I love that, I'm going to be cool. I'm going to be, got this down, man. I got this rocking. I'm going to say, Sir Patrick, I just want to say the inner light was transcendent. It's something that should be taught at every acting class, just, how to take 45 minutes and literally expand an entire character. It's something you should be proud of. And if you're not, allow me to tell you how proud you should be, because it's just a great piece of work. So this is going on in my mind. This is what I've got ready.
Absolutely.
I'm working on this storyboard with Guy Diaz, and suddenly I hear behind me, I don't think Xavier would say that. And I'm like, oh my God. And I turn around and it's him. And he's dressed as Xavier, the whole bit. He's not in the chair, but he's walking along with Bryan Singer at the time. And my heart's just going. I'm going, inner light, you've got this, you got this. And Guy Diaz sees this and he looks at me and he goes, you all right? I said, I'm just really excited. And he goes, do you want to meet him? I said, oh, yes, I really do. I'm going, inner light, this is it.
Yep.
He walks up and he says, Sir Patrick, this is John Delaney. He's one of our storyboard artists on the show. He's a big fan. He'd like to meet you if that's not a problem. And he goes, oh, it's very nice to meet you, John. And I do this. Big fan. And he goes, all right. I'm like, inner light. I'm good. Pretty exciting.
What a cool moment, though.
It was fun. I mean, I have no regrets. I don't think, if I'd rolled off this big dissertation to him anyway, that he might have remembered that any more than he remembered big fan, but
Well, yeah, I mean, the best version of that story would be you telling him that, and then he looking at you going, the inner light? What's that?
I did so many of those episodes.
Well, and you must experience that too, though. Like, you must experience fans coming up to you, because sometimes, we do a little bit of work. I've had this happen even with the podcast. And I mean, this is such a small thing. For you sometimes fans get so deep, and they meticulously learn every single little detail, and they'll go to the creators, the person who actually drew the frame, and say, hey, what about this and that and this and that? And then they threw in a whole bunch more depth than you may have even thought at that time. And isn't that the beautiful part about this medium of comic books?
You really couldn't have said it better, Mike. It's one of the things that I absolutely adore about going to Comic Cons. For a while, I got sort of turned off by Comic Cons, specifically in the late 2000s.
Yeah.
They've gotten so preoccupied with the movies that they weren't really talking about comics anymore. The dealers were pulling out. You could get, a lot of movie merchandise, but it just didn't feel like the things. And that's slowly come back to being comic-centric, which is what brought me back. And I had a small publishing company, Comic Stream, that I was trying to get out there doing that. So I was happy to see that it had gone back to that, but I did get a little turned off on that. So what's happened, which has been so great, is it's about the fans again. And they want to tell you about what they took from that, or how they saw this character. And I'm fascinated and tickled by every single drawing having so much significance to somebody else. And, from a commercial aspect, just trying to get a deadline done, sometimes you're not quite as committed. You are in the roughs, but, when you're cleaning it up, you're not really as committed anymore to that emotional identity of the scene. But the fans sure are. And they'll talk to you about stuff like that. And, this one guy said to me, he goes, that scene in Superman vs. Lobo, which we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Superman has to leave the Earth. He's been infected with a disease. He's basically a typhoid Mary. So he can never walk the Earth again. This is before he and Lois are married. So he's taken off in this rocket, and he has basically one chance before the rocket leaves the atmosphere to contact somebody, and he calls Lois, and she's at the Daily Planet, and she goes, hey, Smallville, what's going on? And he says, I just want to let you know I'm going to be out of town for a little while, and hopefully I'll get back soon, but if not, I love working with you. He's trying to be all, casual, and she's going, okay, well, whatever, don't worry, I'll cover your work until you get back. And she was kind of unaware of it. It's this beautiful, heartbreaking moment that David McElhenney wrote. And I'm thinking, and I tried to capture it in his expression and hers, and this fan comes up to me and says, oh, that's my favorite part of the comic. I'm going, oh, thanks, man. That really meant a lot to me, too. He goes, no, but the thing that I want to know is, I said, what? He goes, when he's calling Lois, what phone number did he use?
Wow.
I love that, though.
Wow, yep.
I love that they actually were wondering about that. And I went, I don't know. I have no idea. But cool. I'm assuming he had her on speed dial. I don't know.
Yeah. They go deep. And that's what we do. Like when we're fans of this stuff, we go really deep.
I dig it. I dig it.
How am I doing for time? Just out of curiosity here. We're 40 minutes. Okay. So we're not too far over. I was worried that this podcast today was going to go over. Can I have your assurance that that you'll come back one day? Like, because I mean, you and I have, as you know, we're scratching the surface. A lot of the men out there. I mean, I want to talk a little bit about the comic book audience demographic, because you have a very unique perspective on that.
Sure.
Now, would you say when you started, you know, vast majority of fans are men, and is it still that way, or have you seen a shift over the last in your career?
Oh, it's been a tectonic shift. I mean, the amount of girls that are at Comic Cons now, and the amount that they are invested in the characters. You know, when I first started, again, I've been doing this almost 30 years in comics, so it's been a while.
Yeah.
And it used to just be guys, you know, and as the girls did show up, they were dressed sort of in cosplay. The guy wanted them to dress up as his girlfriend. And they were kind of into it, but not really into it. Now, you know, cosplay's become its own thing. There's a bunch of cosplay players that actually sit out there and sign autographs. So, and I love that. I love the celebration of all those things in this culture. But what I really love is that the writing has become so much more nuanced and has become so much more inclusive to female and to male voices. And so you get writers like Gail Simone, who are phenomenal writers.
Yeah.
Just happens to be a woman. She's just a great writer. That's, to me, that's good writing is all it is, you know?
Yep.
And so there are so many of those great writers out there right now. Or Nicola Scott, a phenomenal comic book artist. And just her stuff blows my mind. Just happens to be female, you know?
Yeah.
It should never be that distinction, but it was for a long time. And that's melting away now. And now we're starting to see this celebration of all these different writers and artists, and people are less inclined to say, oh, well, this is a female artist or a male artist, you know? If I can liken it even to what Martin Luther King was saying, which is, you know, I long for the time when we're judged on our merit, not on the color of our skin or our sexuality or any of those things.
Right.
It's the work, right? And that's why I think I really love what's going on in comics now. And there's still work to be done. We still need to get a little bit better at it. There's no doubt about that. But even for all the guys who may, you know, grumble and mutter and say, you know, it's best man for the job. It shouldn't be a woman or a man. Well, that was great for a long, long time, but there weren't a lot of opportunities for women. So it's wonderful that we're actually opening up that opportunities for women to express themselves as artists and writers, because they have a unique voice that needs to be told. And even if they're just telling the same kind of stories that we're doing, they shouldn't be persecuted because they're women. They shouldn't be persecuted because they're anything other than good or bad. If you're a bad writer, I don't want to read your stuff. If you're a great writer, I don't care what sexuality or sex you are or any of those things. It matters nothing to me. I only care about the characters and the stories. So that's what I love has happened in comics now. And that's probably the thing that drew me back to Comic Cons more than anything else, was this inclusion. You know, now when you're sitting in a green room, it's a 50-50 split between men and women. It did not used to be that way. It was just tons of guys, you know, and smelly and awful. And you know, you know, women are better. They really are.
Yeah, I you know, it's funny. I think about the idea of going to a convention or something like that where my wife is not at all impressed or engaged with any of the content, versus going to a place like that where my wife actually gets very excited about these things. Candy and I just finished. We just went through all of the Marvel movies in chronological order.
Nice.
And it was her idea. Like,
wow.
Like, are you kidding me?
I was already a fan of hers. I was up here. Like, I'm way up here now.
Yeah. And she's excited about the Snyder cut of Justice League, and she's excited. Like,
me started on that. I'm so freaking stoked.
Oh man, me too. Oh yeah, and we could go on that, and maybe we should finish off talking a little bit about the movies and how that's changed things. But like, I think about when I was in my, you know, teens or 20s, that was a part of my life I couldn't share with you know, the girl that was on my arm. It just wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't something that was there, and I love that she is. Because the stories are iconic in my opinion. Again, you can take it to a point where they're even mythological, right? They're our version of mythology. They are inclusive. They do include everybody. And for it to be a closed club for as long as it was, I'm really happy to hear what you're saying about how on the top levels you're seeing all this inclusion happening.
Yeah, I think, it's a funny thing because there are many people who rebel against it. And again, we'll say stuff like, well, it's the best person for the job. And of course, we all agree with that idea. But if
Sure.
the best person never gets a chance because of the fact they happen to be a different gender or a different race or a different sexuality or any of those things,
Yeah.
that's not fair. And it doesn't give a chance for all voices to be heard. So the toughest part about comics was it was traditionally appealing to young guys. So they thought, well, guys should be writing this. They understand, right? But if you're writing Wonder Woman, what do I know about, being a woman, truly? I know some things, obviously, but I can't speak to that. And I can't speak with a real voice on that, right? So suddenly you have somebody who comes in and writes it. And, George Perez did a phenomenal job writing Wonder Woman. And it was very, robust with mythology, and same with Brian Azzarello. But when you listen to a Gail Simone, the nuances when she's writing Batgirl, like suddenly Batgirl's thinking about her phone and thinking about the things that she might have been thinking about that they wouldn't have thought to write into that character.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that subtlety and the nuance. And I think that we have a tendency to just want to say, well, no, it should always be this way. And that's what makes things not progress. The movies in Marvel would never have been any good if they kept following the storyline of the comics. But once you cast someone like Robert Downey Jr., suddenly Tony Stark makes sense. Even in the comics, it was hard to imagine why this guy would flush his life down the toilet. But when you start to see all his daddy issues and see all these things, all the subtlety that he brought to that role, and his complete disregard for any kind of responsibility for the actions he's making as Stark Industries, and then to have that trauma happen, Stan Lee and he did his best to kind of capture that, but it took an actor to really sell you on it to go, oh, I get it now. I get why you would have that thing. And I think that the same thing can be applied to all the various different things. The Snyder Cut is a great example of this. I've been a long proponent of love of what Zack Snyder did with those movies, but I understood it was just a little, for lack of a better term, ahead of its time. People really wanted the action adventure, the happy-go-lucky, everybody gets along, and we're all winking and saying, hey, we're wearing costumes. Isn't this funny?
Yes.
Where Snyder said, no, this is serious. This guy's parents were killed in front of him, a bat flew overhead, and now he thinks he's a bat. It's a psychotic break, and he played him that way, right? Superman was this guy who was actually afraid to show people his powers. What would that mean to my family, to all these things? All those subtle nuances. So I was a big Zack Snyder fan, a big excited idea that the DC universe was going to move in a very different way than the Marvel universe. And ironically, in the comics, the Marvels were way more serious, and the DC tended to be a little more upbeat, whereas in the films, they kind of went the other way. So I was excited by that. And unfortunately, he was just a little ahead of the curve. So I think people are far more interested in seeing that now and all the subtlety because of the fact that Marvel's had so much success, but we're starting to see it be a bit repetitive now. We're starting to go, okay, Doctor Strange feels a lot like Iron Man. It's the same.
There's a formulaic part to it.
Yeah, it's starting to become a thing. And it doesn't mean that there's an opportunity to move beyond that. I think there is.
Yeah.
I love the fact that now people are going, okay, let's see what Zack Snyder actually had in mind. Because we saw what Joss Whedon tried to do, and that's a thankless gig that he got given. Trying to fix this film with notes from the studio. God knows I've been there, it's the shit. But I really love the fact that Zack Snyder is now getting a chance to say, here's what I actually had in mind. And I got a feeling it's going to sort of set a precedent for what DC Comics films can be. And that's why I love the multiverse aspect of it, that, Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck and Robert Pattinson can all exist. And have these multiple Batman stories in that, and we don't have to be so pedantic and so, oh my God, it's got to be this guy as Batman. No, it doesn't. There are multiple Earths in the idea of the DC canon, and that's existed since the 1950s. So,
absolutely, they were the first ones to do that, and it's funny how Marvel, it seems now, is starting to try and copy that a little bit. The name of the new Doctor Strange movie is the Multiverse of Madness, and they do talk about it. But the idea that there was one Superman who could meet another Superman is not a new idea. That was something DC was doing in the comics decades ago, half a century ago.
The first time they teamed up with Earth 2, which is the original Justice Society, Superman and Batman were there meeting the current Batman and Superman.
Yeah.
This is an idea that DC pioneered. I definitely get why Doctor Strange plays into that, and that character can run that. Sure. But, from the purist comic book guy myself, it kind of annoys me a little bit because I think that's a DC thing. And I don't think, what is Marvel?
Marvel's certainly not known for it in their story.
Yeah, and I think it's jumping on board an idea here that DC should have really been given free run, because this Flash movie is going to blow people's minds when they do it.
Well, I think they've positioned themselves in a way to do that. Having so many actors have played Batman or Superman, for example, gives them that kind of ability to stretch that way. They've had so many different versions of it, whether it be in the TV show, animated series, all of these things. And I love that the uniqueness of each company is also expressing itself in the uniqueness of their film presentation.
Brother, you could have said it better. You know, that's the thing. Like, less of this. Oh, you know, Marvel does this and DC sucks, or DC's better and Marvel. You know, less of that. Just let's figure out the best way to tell these stories. If it makes sense for the Flash to travel through the multiverse and encounter Michael Keaton Batman,
yep,
and it makes sense for Ben Affleck to still be there too.
Yep.
It makes sense for Robert Pattinson to have his own world where people are dressing up in Halloween costumes as Superman and Wonder Woman. Maybe aren't Superman and Wonder Woman. Maybe that exists in comic books in his world. That's cool and nuanced and beautiful. And it allows every director and every writer a chance to just have free reign and run around and go, cool, I get to tell these stories any which way I want. I think that's fucking awesome. Fucking awesome, I tell you.
It is. I could do this with you all day. I've been given the signal that it's time to close things up. Have you drawn something?
I did. I drew the Wizard Shazam.
Oh my God! Did you really? Okay, hold on. They're turning it so I can see.
Shazam guy.
Oh,
he's facing his profile. There he is. The Wizard Shazam.
Oh. My man. Oh, thank you, John. I want to thank you personally for doing heCast. That you didn't even for a second think that I was taking advantage of our friendship and asking you to be on here. I know that you're excited about what Candy's building.
Yeah. I love what you guys are doing with this. I want to support it 100%. I think you and Candy are doing some amazing stuff. And I think this is a sort of a first salvo for a lot of people to kind of get an idea of what this can be and this kind of dialogue. And I think that's really, really important. And I'm super proud of the work you guys are doing. I'm very, very proud to be part of the show. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I can't thank you enough. We will do it again. When the He Changed It community, the heCast community is going up and strong, we'll get you in there and you and I can maybe do a Q&A or something like that. We'll do some really fun stuff. But John, I just want to say thank you so much for being such a good friend. And I appreciate the hell out of you, man.
Me too, you brother. Let's get together and pound some beverages. Yes.
As soon as humanly possible.
Absolutely,
please let it be soon.
Protocol stop, but you know what? We get virtually drink.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been good to even just see your face and hear your voice today.
You brother.
There we go. That's another episode right there of heCast. So grateful for everything that He Changed It is doing and all of the things that are coming from this. If you haven't downloaded the app, go to the Apple Store or the Google Play Store. He Changed It. Go to hechangedit.com for the information. And if you are in the app, come see me in the heCast community. Very, very cool to have you with us today. For John Delaney, my name is Mike Chisholm. Thank you so much for being part of another episode of heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. We'll see you next time.